Hey guys, I'm Sharon Restrepo, back with Real Estate Steals, Deals, and Opportunities. And today we are going to talk about buying condominiums. In fact, there's so much to this particular niche that we've got a part one and part two. So make sure you come back for part two. All right, so let's get a move on here. All right, so condos can offer a great place to live. With all owners contributing to the amenities, the monthly cost to enjoy a certain lifestyle can be attained sooner than if you...
Guess what? When you dropped, it took you out of the host, and so you can't... I got to... I'm sorry. Just there's a certain amount of humor you have to see in that whole thing, because here I was proud of myself for being, I got it.
Right?
And what is that?
Well, at least we didn't get too far along.
Yeah, exactly.
Always.
All right.
Okay. Hi, I'm Sharon Restrepo, and I am back with another Real Estate Steals, Deals, and Opportunities. And today we're going to talk about buying condominiums. In fact, there's so much to learn when buying condominiums that we've separated this into part one and part two. So make sure you tune back in for part two. All right, so condos can offer a great place to live. With all owners contributing to the amenities, the monthly cost to enjoy a certain lifestyle can be attained sooner than if you tried to buy all of those amenities for yourself under one roof. A lot more money. Condos do have their pros and cons. For those of you looking to buy a condo to occupy, rent, or flip, there's a lot to consider. Much more due diligence is required to make a good buying decision when buying condos, and that's what we're going to talk about. So today we're going to discuss the due diligence involved in condo purchases. These include a homeowners association, which we're going to call HOA, and there's condo association, which they call COA. All right, so really this should be COA, but I'm just going to put it all under the one thing called HOA. Okay, so there's HOA rules and restrictions. There's the budget, assessments and pending assessments, percentage of units rented, amenities, number of associations and what's included, buying at foreclosure auction, and more. Okay, so we're going to talk about all of the things that we can discuss under each one of these bullet points because there really is a lot to consider. So let's get moving on here. All right, so HOA rules and restrictions. Again, remember, duplicate HOA for COA and vice versa. All right, so a lot of times, homeowners associations, condo associations, they will create rules and restrictions, right? Some of those restrictions will include age, all right? So many communities, you'll note, will be adult communities or 55 plus communities. And, there's a lot of even laws governing the restriction on age. And so in every state, yours could be a little bit different. You might not find a lot of these adult communities where you're at, but where I'm at in South Florida, they're everywhere because everybody moves here to retire, apparently. Okay, so anyway, age restriction is a big thing. Now, in some of these communities, they can say, all right, well, 80% of these units are going to be restricted to 55 and older, but the other 20%, we don't care. Everybody could live there. And that could be because they're trying to comply to a law, or it's just the way that they're governing the ownership. Okay, so you'll want to find out about that. And there's also restrictions as far as age on, okay, so I'm an investor, I'm not yet 55, can I buy the place and own it, but not live there? And let's say I rent it, and my renters will of course be 55 and older. Will that work? And so you'll ask those kinds of questions, and yes, many of these associations will say anyone can own it. We don't care your age, but only people 55 and older can live in it. And then others will say at least one person 55 and older must be living there, and the others can live there as long as they're over 18. Okay, so the ages are going to vary in restriction, and then there's no age restriction at all. Okay, so you'll look into that and you'll find out, okay, well, I hear you have an age restriction, but tell me more about that restriction so I can see how I can make it work for me. Okay, I've had strict HOA communities or COA communities that say we're 55 and older, but my couple that I'm moving in was 56 and his wife was 53, and they've made exception for that. So there will be exceptions, they're close enough to the age 55, and, sometimes they're just lenient that way. So, you can ask those questions and find out. Now, there's also restrictions on ownership. And when I mean ownership, I mean the way that title is held. So some condo associations will say no corporations can own, no trusts can own, only individual names. And others will say, we don't care who takes title as long as you comply with all of the other rules. And so that's something you're going to want to look into before you can even take title. And for those of you who are renovating the unit, whether you live there, you're going to rent it, or you're going to retail it, flip it, there are work hours and even traffic rules for your workers. So they'll say, all right, if you're going to do this with the unit, we're only going to allow you to come in between 9 and 5 on Monday through Friday. And you've got to drive through this certain driveway, come in this certain elevator, bring your equipment in this certain elevator, and those are only working on these times. And so there'll be a lot of restrictions to your workers and what you want to get done. So you really need to look at that, because that's super important. You might think you have a 4-week renovation, but it's going to take you 8 weeks or 6 weeks because of some odd work hour rule that they put on you. Now, there are also restrictions on those work hours in season. Okay, so like here I am in South Florida, we have a season. So when it is winter here and still 80 degrees outside, everybody else where it's 80 below is here, right? So it's called season. And in season, many of these condominiums, depending on where they're located, will say there is no work to be done in season unless it's an emergency. Okay, so I own a home in a very seasonal location, and no work's to be done in season. Well, season for them starts December 1 through the end of March. Okay, so if I'm buying my renovation home, right, that I'm going to flip on December 1, and I don't realize I can't even begin work on it until after March, wow, that's big. Because my cost of money just went up, my time, my market conditions, I better relook at everything and make sure I'm sure about everything. Okay, so that's not something you want to find out after you own it. All right, so one time I bought a home right when season started, and because the roof was leaking, they allowed us what's called a variance to go ahead and have the roof replaced during season because it's an emergency. You know, you got mold, mildew, it's not even healthy. And so you can get variances for emergencies and whatnot. All right, so consider that. You've got work hours, work seasons, etc. Insurance. You know, the association may require you to carry insurance on the portion of the coverage that they do not cover. Some condo associations include in their dues insurance for maybe just your building, maybe some, whatever it is, okay, for certain things that happen. But it's not covering your unit inside from the drywall in, really. So you want to get insurance from the drywall in. So your insurance really reduces in price because of that. Now, some homeowners associations or condo associations, they have no insurance at all, and they require all of the owners to participate in that insurance by proving that you have it, including the portion of your unit that would cover you if the building blew away. All right, so the insurance varies all over the place, and you're going to find all of these things in their condo docs. All right, so it's very important to get a set of condo docs to review when you're buying a condo. And when you're doing all of this through a realtor, they'll have all of the forms that you need in order to get those condo docs. Typically, you're given 3 days to review condo docs once you receive them. And you can cancel the deal based on those condo docs if there's something you read that you didn't like, you didn't know, nobody told you, all right? But it's very important also to read the amendments. So you could have condo docs that were written 40 years ago, but they've amended so many of those rules 10 times, and all of these amendments you need to read as well, okay? Many times the rental restrictions are in these docs, and sometimes the docs come with a set of rules and regulations in addition to the docs. So a lot of these things, guys, you're going to find out upon application and approval. And really when you find out most of the things is when you're sitting before the board, having your interview, getting approved. And that's when, they'll explain things to you and questions you may have. So all of the foregoing you might want to find out at the approval meeting. However, this meeting is going to be subsequent to your 3-day right to cancel based on the doc. So you're not going to want to wait till this approval period for important questions that can affect the decision of whether you want to buy it or not. Okay, so keep that in mind. All right, and as we continue with under that guideline there, under that topic, we're talking about online docs. And I mention this because these condominium docs, they have to be recorded in public record. So you can go online and do a search and find the docs and find the amendments for the condo association that you're interested in looking into, and you can read everything. And this will include the pet restrictions, and again, you want to read amendments. You know, there's a building that we manage a condo in, and it has been absolutely no pets forever. And then people started coming in with their help dog or whatever. You can get the, you know, legal thing now that you can name your dog a help, whatever it helps you. And so now everybody's moving in with their helper. And so the condo has now amended their rules on pets, and that is allowing more people to buy up the units because now they can bring their pet, and also it's easier to rent because they can bring their pet. So, you know, you have the pros and cons, because the more lenient some of the rules are, the more valuable the condos become. So you can actually have an increase in value because they loosen some restrictions on the rules. And at the same time, it's because of some strict rules that you maintain value, because not anybody and everybody can move in and bring, you know, every pet known to man, etc. So online, you can find a lot of those docs. You should be able to find all of them. That's where your rental restrictions will be listed as well. And so now rental restrictions can include, like what we talked about in the age community. So they can restrict the age. They can say no renting allowed at all ever, all right? And that is to maintain the value of the units, because they're thinking we're not going to allow riffraff, right? Okay, so also there'll be a restriction on, all right, well, you can own, if you own for a period of time first, then you can rent. So there might be a 1-year rule, a 2-year rule. And so this is done also to encourage investors not to buy in this building, because they don't want to fill it full of renters and bring down the value in the building, because, you know, the more renters you have, just statistically, it just starts to deteriorate. It's not taken care of as well. All right, so renting restrictions will include, hey, renting is allowed with approval. So, I mean, I have buildings I manage where the HOA is non-existent. Nobody ever replies to an email, shows up for anything. I think they just want their fee, their application fee. So we mail it in and we move the tenant in. But then others, they want their fee, they want blood types, they want everything. And they move them in with this review and an approval. And so these approval periods can take up to 30 days. And sometimes they don't even have a rush time. So this makes it difficult for investors that are trying to bail people in trouble out with their condo, because they need the HOA to make an exception for them, because the title company can't even close the deal without the approval in many cases. So that can be a hindrance. You're going to want to have your owner that you're trying to help out actually go to someone at the board and say, hey, we need, you know, an exception made, or we're going to lose our place in foreclosure. We need some help, whatever the problem is. Okay. And then we have, you know, nicer units, or again, it's developments that are trying to keep the value up, and they're saying, you know what, when renters move in, there's a lot more damage and no one wants to take responsibility, and then we have to find the owner, and the owner doesn't want to pay it. Their tenant's saying they didn't do it. The owner's trying to get the security deposit from their tenant back so they can pay for these damages. All right, so now HOAs are saying, or condos are saying, okay, we're going to move your tenant in. You can ask whatever security deposit you want, owner, but we want one too. And we're going to take a security deposit from your tenant as well, and we're going to hold it. And when we don't have any issues with them, then we'll move them out and give them their deposit back as well after their move out. And so you're seeing more restrictions like that, where the condo associations are getting more involved in policing, and those are the developments that will maintain their value. You know, they look better, and they typically, when they are getting security deposits from those tenants, is typically because they have a ton of amenities that they're offering the people who are living, the residences, right, that are being used, and they're trying to avoid vandalism and these things not being taken care of well. So they want the tenant to come in with something to lose, and just like an owner would suffer, right? Because rather than assessing all the owners for damages of people's tenants, they're actually making the tenants responsible. So it's not a bad idea. All right, so now let's move on to the condo association's budget. All right, when you are considering purchasing a condo, you can ask to see the budget. You can ask to see the books. And what you want to look for is what does the budget look like? Do they have enough money in the bank to pay everything in this budget? Is there money in reserves, which is like a savings account to pay for upcoming things? Like at some point in the future, the building might need the parking lot paved. It might need a new roof. Whatever it is, sprinklers can break, whatever happens. And you're also going to want to review their insurance policy. What does their insurance cover? And is it enough money? I mean, how old is this policy? Did they ever increase the limits on it? Or is it all going to fall on us with some big assessment after a hurricane or a flood or a fire or whatever? So you're going to want to actually investigate all of these things. And this is what most buyers do not do. They do not go in and not just ask, but look at the documents. Because if you're flipping a property, this happened to us once years ago. We were flipping a property. The dues, the HOA dues in this community, and it was a expensive community in Boca, was $550 a month. Okay. Well, about 3 months after we bought it, there was an assessment that came through for like $17,000 per unit. I can't remember what it was from or for or whatever, right? But it's an improvement that's being done within the community. And so you had the option as an owner to pay it all in full or pay it over time by increasing the amount, on the monthly payment, which now would bring the dues up to like $770 a month. And so what we did as investors, we bought it right. And so we were happier than we were sad, right? That we weren't going to lose money because of this. But we didn't pay that up front because it was stupid to pay all that money out as an investor. So what we did is we paid the increased amount of dues during our ownership, but we did not pass that along as an assessment that our new buyer had to come in. So what I did is I went and looked at all the other listings, and I noticed that everyone was disclosing this assessment and that the amount of money you were paying would drop after 5 years. But all of these buyers were coming in, looking at all of the units, knowing that they were going to pay $750 a month for the next 5 years unless they wanted to pay this extra money. So what we did is we raised our price a little, but we said, we're going to pay that $15. You're going to come in and pay that regular $550. So we sold our unit right away, and we sold it for a little bit more money. So, we did well. It was a good decision, even though something bad happened, right? It's like making lemonade out of lemons. So anyway, if we would have actually went out of our way to go and request to look at these things, sit down with the accounting department and say what's going on with everything, they would have told us. This is not like a surprise. It's just like overnight say we're assessing everybody 17 grand. They knew this was coming, but it was not disclosed to us. We bought, I believe it was bank owned at the time. And, they don't have to disclose you anything, and it's up to you to find out everything. And so we actually did not do what we should do in this part of the due diligence. And so we got stuck with that. So that's the kind of thing that can happen to you. You want to find out about assessments and pending assessments. And, when you're buying in the regular retail market, your seller is supposed to give you this disclosure form of everything that they know. So you're relying on them to tell you, yes, there's a pending assessment coming in the future. But, if they throw their mail in the garbage and don't pay attention to what's going on, they don't know either. So you really have to pick up this part of the investigation yourself, because you're the one who's going to pay the price. And so you want to make sure that they have reserves and that they're prepared for the work that's going to be done in the future, because they're setting aside reserve money. Okay, so that's a really important part of it. It's very important to look at this kind of thing after a crash, because the HOAs just deplete in budget because no one's paying. They're all in foreclosure. And so all of the other owners end up with assessments to make up for it. Okay, so after a crash, you'll see a lot of this stuff, but that's when you're going and you're stealing these things anyway. You're going to make a deal based on this problem, but you're still going to want to know how big that problem is. All right, so another thing that you need to look into is the percentage of units rented. All right, so I'm speaking to you, like I said, whether you're going to live there yourself or you're looking at it as an investment. If you're buying this as an investor, you really don't care. Okay, you're coming in, you're probably paying cash, and you're going to rent it out. You're never going to live there. But when the number of units rented exceeds a certain percentage, then lenders can refuse to lend at all. Like FHA, they will absolutely not lend if a certain percentage of units are rented. Okay, so that means investors own a lot of units in the complex. FHA says, we're not going to lend there because we're not going to set ourselves up to take back all these units, and we're stuck with all these HOA fees we have to pay because nobody else can pay them. So they're kind of, after, you know, everything busted, they kind of regrouped and said, here's where we won't go. So the lenders may refuse to lend, reduce their loan to value, which is very common, or change other loan terms. So I recently sold a unit in a very nice complex, and the number of units rented exceeded the FHA guideline. So we had to bring in conventionally qualified buyers, and they had to put a minimum of 20% down because there was too many units rented for the guidelines to fall into even what an owner occupant would put down. So normally they would put down 5 to 10%, but it became 20% down so that their risk was minimized by lending in this complex. And so the number of units rented will affect, you know, you depending on your plan with the condo. All right, so keep that part in mind. All right, guys, so that wraps up part 1. Now, when we come back next week, we'll talk more about the rest of the items that I discussed earlier, including buying them at foreclosure and how that affects you with regard to everything we just talked about and more. So thanks for tuning in. You can reach me in West Palm Beach here. Here's my email and my address if you are interested in buying any wholesale deals in this neck of the woods. And if you enjoyed what you learned about part 1, then join us for part 2 next week. And also, guys, when you learn more about real estate investing through learnfromgreen.com, they have great video conference classes just like this one that you can be a part of with all kinds of great topics, not just real estate. When you increase your knowledge, you increase your income. Thanks for tuning in today.